Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me for this workshop, and thank you for joining the Community Indicators Consortium 2020 Virtual Impact Summit. My name is Marija Drobnjak, and I'll be sharing with you our approach and tools to explore needs and resources of communities in New York City. So before I start, I would like to say that you can use a chat box and Q&A for any questions throughout the workshops. I will also prompt you with some polls and some questions as I'm going through. And also, if you would like to speak, you can just unmute yourself and I would say and speak at any time. And Jennifer from the CIC is here monitoring the chat and Q&A and all other activities. So she will be guiding us through that. So I will, I think it's 4:32, so I'll get started. So I'll give you a brief overview of the presentation today. So I'll start by the general overview of the Citizens Committee for Children of New York, our advocacy, civic engagement, and research approach. I will give you an overview of our publications and online resources and community-based assessments. And then I will really dive deeper into how do we define need, like how do we define about our child and family well-being index, as well as about an asset-based approach to addressing community needs. And then I will jump into a demo of data.ccc New York. And then my idea is that after that, we convene back and think about mapping community resources tool, exploring it, discussing, and I'll be open to any questions at this point and throughout. And then for the end, I really envision that we can go through an activity of creating your own asset map with our raw data and My Maps Google tool. And yes, feel free to tell me throughout how you feel about all of this, and I can modify as we go. So Citizens Committee for Children of New York is a non-profit, non-partisan organization that informs and mobilizes New Yorkers. We've done this work for 75 years, and really our mission is to ensure that every child is healthy, housed, educated, and safe. And I would like to, Jennifer, if you can pull the poll question, how familiar you are with the New York City? Very familiar, not at all, somewhat. So feel free to respond to the poll so I can modify the workshop as I go. And yes, so a little bit about our work. CCC's advocacy includes analyzing and reacting to city and state budget and legislation proposals, as well as building coalitions across multiple issue areas, such as access to quality early education, after-school programming, justice for young people, eliminating family homelessness, behavioral health, etc. We also engage New Yorkers through our civic engagement programs available to both adults and young people. And we carry out digital campaigns to support action to call or write to legislators. And lastly, our research and data work really is supporting both our advocacy and civic engagement. It includes an evergreen database of indicators on child and family well-being. And we report on both positive and worrisome trends across New York City communities. And to give you just a gist of publications that we are producing, we produce a number of resources in print and online. And since 1993, we have been producing Keeping Track of New York City's Children Data Book, which is a publication that we produce every 2 years. Another annual publication is Child and Family Wellbeing in New York City, which is really index ranking 59 communities in the city and comparing them among each other. And I will dive deeper into this publication, so I will not share more at this point. We also, in the past couple of years, we really engaged in community-based assessments across several New York City communities, where we engage with parents, caregivers, and youth, and conducting focus groups and interviews with service providers to really gauge what are the key issues that families are experiencing and what are good things that people are experiencing in their communities. And we really couple that with data analysis and asset mapping tool that I will be talking more about throughout the workshop. And also, I would like to note that in handout section, I uploaded several of our reports, as well as one Word document that we will need later in a workshop. But feel free to download those or explore our website. And I will add here and here with the data.ccc New York. It is really an online database that was born out of keeping track of New York City Children 2020. It hosts more than 100 of indicators on child well-being, and all of the tools I'll be discussing today, such as Child and Family Well-being Index and Community Asset Mapping Tool, are on this platform. And while I will walk us through the demo of the site, like a live demo of the site, here's just a snippet of a couple of our tools. Rank communities by risk is here. So we update the data on this tool annually after we produce the publication. On the map community resources tool, we as a baseline, we are showing the map of risks, but also there is an option to overlay different assets, and I will go into that in more depth. Explore data is part of the site that I will spend less time with, but it is really the most rich section of the site with more than hundreds of indicators across all of these domains: demographic, economic condition, housing, health, early care and education, and others. And then users also have option on our site to create location profiles. And Jennifer, if you don't mind pulling the poll question, have you heard of the Citizens Committee for Children prior to this workshop? We would like to know about our audience for today's workshop, so feel free to answer to the poll. And also, I would like to pause here and before I move on to the next section, give everyone an opportunity to type in any questions or either in chat or Q&A box. And Jennifer, if you don't mind reading those to me, it would be great.
For sure. The 16 of the people polled, so 100% polled that they have not heard of the Citizens Committee for Children of New York prior to this workshop. One person has. One person did.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. Well, I'll keep that in mind, and I hope this is giving you like enough of the overview and useful content for your work. So, are there any other questions at this point?
No questions at this time.
Okay, great. So I'm shifting on to really telling you how we are thinking about identifying needs and what is Child and Family Wellbeing Index report and index on its own. So this approach and creating this index came from the idea that we do have these more than hundreds of indicators that we can observe individually. But really to tell a more comprehensive story, we combined, we pulled 18 indicators that we are tracking annually. And really it's affording us a broad scale understanding of where children and families might face greater challenges in order to inform and spur the actions of government, civil society, foundations, etc. We really considered this report as a great conversation starter about disparities between different communities, and it's opener for many questions and not really publication where you will find all of the answers. Oftentimes in these publications, we do say that certain trends are requiring further exploration and digging why certain communities are faring in a certain way. It is published, as I said, every year. It compares 59 community districts in a city across based on 18 community level indicators. And now I'm on the slide, I'm showing you 6 domains: economic security, housing, health, education, youth, and family and community. And you can see that there are 3 indicators in each domain. So we combine these 18 indicators and we create overall risk, overall index, but we also we do have that on our tool and in our publication, what is the index for each individual domain. And in creating these indices, we really selected, we followed a review of similar statewide, national, international indices. We had a couple of pre-requirements. The data is publicly available, that it is available annually, that it really refers to children and families, and it is normalized to take into account variation among populations and sizes across geographies. So 11 indicators are sourced from the US Census Bureau American Community Survey, and the remaining are from local New York City administrative data. And on this map, you see that in creating the index, all the communities are falling in one of the 5 categories, from the lowest risk in blue to the highest one in red. And by just comparing all of the domains, we see that certain communities have the same patterns. So they're experiencing risks in the same communities are experiencing challenges across different domains. But we also see, if you take a look at the health map, that a different set of communities is ranked as the highest risk. So that is one of the situations where we see that bronze communities in the north, those highlighted in yellow in a health domain, are faring moderately and better than communities in Queens, which are the communities in like eastern part of the city highlighted in red.
Maria?
Yes.
Jessica Jones wants to know if there is any move to also look at environmental indicators and their impact to children in New York.
If there is any look at which indicators?
Environmental indicators.
We do track a couple of environmental indicators on the Explore tab. So we have indicators that pertain to asthma, that pertain to open space and accessibility. However, they are not part of our of these 18 indicators that comprise the index. However, every year that we are publishing the index and we are really rethinking the methodology, we are rethinking if certain indicators are the most appropriate ones. So we do always reevaluate, and we are always happy to hear from folks. So feel free to email me or be in touch with us. And I'm moving to the next slide, where I just took a screenshot of the risk ranking tool on our database. And I will go into more details in a few slides, so on a live side. But basically, you can see that on the top image, you see the map of the city. You see that there is a legend from the lightest blue to the darkest blue being the highest risk. And then you can see that you can actually in a tool compare different communities, and you can see indicators that are feeding each domain. Like for economic security, we see that there are child poverty data, media income, parental employment stability. And on this particular screenshot, we can see that while child poverty in Battery Park, Tribeca, which is a community in that southern tip of Manhattan, the poverty is like 3.2% versus Mott Haven, which are these highlighted in yellow in the Bronx. Child poverty is 58%. And similar disparities are visible on median income, 23,000 versus 234. And then here I am just showing a screenshot of the capability on the tool to show all the indexes for across the 6 domains and really seeing what they mean in relation to the data. And what I would like to pose as a question, and you can write if you feel like, are you already familiar with these methodologies that I just described? And are there other tools that you are using that are similar? And if you feel free, if you feel it is helpful, you can share in a Q&A or chat box so others can see them, and we can also have that insight. So you can do that at any time throughout the presentation. And I'm moving now to our like baseline thinking about mapping community resources. On this screen, you see a screenshot from our online tool. And really what the concept of pairing needs and risks to assets available to communities is not new to the CCC. What is new is really the fact that a few years ago, we launched this tool on online database, which allows our users, foundations, service providers to really have a better understanding of where resources are. And this is really not created with the mind of creating the directory. It's more like an advocacy tool and understanding needs and like all indicators and index of the risk in relation to assets. And really this whole conversation was evolved from our community-based assessments. When we first, we did 4 community-based assessments in the past couple of years in 4 communities across the city. And when we did the first one in Brownsville in Brooklyn, and we spoke to community and to parents and youth, we really learned that, yes, this is the community where residents are experiencing many challenges, economic, safety, poverty, but also there were many assets that people were proud of, and there were many assets that people were using in their community that were making difference in their lives. At the same time, there were assets that they couldn't access because of crime, because of transportation. So really thinking about assets and learning from communities how they feel about those is really important combination. And while I'll just pull this slide so you have a map of the city, and as I mentioned earlier, in addition to these focus groups and conversations with community members, we also analyze public data. We map assets like across different categories. You can see in one of the reports I uploaded in Handout, and we also like couple that with a community engagement component. And I will say in our last report in Elmhurst and Corona, which we published at the end of 2019, in addition to focus groups and interviews with service providers, we launched a pilot SMS survey in order to get opinions from more residents. And we also did community walks, which was really having opportunity for community to reflect on the data that we produced and on our findings. So on this slide, I just included for the reference, you see all like broader categories of assets that we have on our tool. And really, when we are thinking about assets, we are drawing on those services that are in some shape or form contracted by the government. And we think about assets as services and programs that are really in place to remediate issues that are there to increase the well-being of communities. But also we think about assets that are really there just to support all children and family, regardless of them being in need or not. So we have a food retail, we have banks, open spaces, cultural institutions, libraries, which are those that we want to see everywhere. But then also there are assets like workforce development sites, housing support services, etc., that are really needed in communities where there is a higher need for those. And you will see in our child and well-being report for the first time in 2019, we included analysis of some of these assets and we paired them with the risks. And we could see that in many communities where there is a need for these type of supports, we do see these supports existing. And I'm sure there is always need for more, but that is the overall pattern. And if you wonder how often we update the data, how burdensome is the process or how exciting the process is, most of the data for the assets are coming from different city agencies. And a good majority is available through the New York City Open Data. It is, you might be familiar, it is a portal where agencies are submitting their data sets, so they're publicly available. They're updated on a different scale. Some agencies are updating their information regularly. In some cases, every year, annually. Sometimes we need to push agencies to update the data, but overall, that is one way that we are pulling the data, and I'm personally in charge of that. Second bigger source is New York City Departments of City Planning Facilities database. That was a source that existed even prior to New York City Open Data and all of the data being available there. And we still collect some data from that source. And then we have a couple of state agencies and several. And then for probably a dozen of assets, we have to access data through agencies' portals, or we make requests with agencies to receive the data from them. And then I would say in each of these scenarios, there is still work of cleaning data, making sure it's really representable and geocoding in some cases before we publish it on our tool. And I will say that most likely, and what we hear from our users and service providers we are in touch with, is really having all this data in one place is a helpful resource. And I will get into some other capabilities during the live demo.
Maria, what's the process for determining which indicators are included?
Which indicators are included in a child and family well-being index?
I believe so, yeah. So yes, what's the process for determining which indicators you select and who's involved in that process?
Well, that process was like when we first established the index, which was in 2015. We really compared like different indices internationally and nationally, and we also there are like few requirements. We needed the data that is available on a community level. So there are different indicators that we would like to include, but if they're available only for the city as a whole, they wouldn't make it in the index. So it has to be available on community district level, which is the most equivalent to PUMAS, if you're familiar with that census geography. Second one, we needed data that is published every year, annually. And in some cases, we really have to be in touch with agencies and make sure that they will publish the data, especially if it is coming from a single agency. And we are aware that for some of these indicators, for example, if we talk about uninsured rate, it goes like it's a couple of percent. It goes probably from 0 point something percent, like in some communities, hypothetically, we have everybody insured. And then in some, we have 4% uninsured rate. In that case, I would say that that's definitely skewing the index in some way compared to median income, where we have a wider range of outcomes, which is probably driving the index. But at the CCC, it was a joint and collective effort, and we partnered with we consulted with many organizations in the process.
And what was was it the same process or similar process for determining what assets to include?
With assets, we really didn't have to have that rigorous process. What we are doing, we are really, even though we are trying to make changes in our index, with assets and with indicators that we have on Explore tab, we really have more freedom to really include assets that are available. I would say the main requirement is that we are either able to have address of certain programs so we can geocode it and be able to map, or that it is already provided. And we are also trying only to publish like government data. So, for example, there is a lot of interest in churches, which is really an asset. It is community asset for many reasons, but there is no really publicly available data file with the religious institutions. So it is one case where we are kind of struggling. We would like to be able to provide that data, but it is not available. Second one is you will see on our tool that we have after-school programs that are provided by the Department of Youth and Community Development. It is a city agency. We know that there are a vast of other after-school programs, either available for fee or provided by other nonprofits. And since there is no publicly available data, we are not able to upload that asset on our tool. Does that answer the question? And I'm happy to talk more about this if we have time at the end.
I think so. Joel Baldwin says that you should be able to use property records to find churches.
That's true, and I would say I'm more than happy to be in touch with that person and maybe get more lead. But for now, we really were trying to use like data that is published by city agencies that are providing these services. If that is the case of pre-K sites or childcare, these are all coming from different agencies or medical institutions. For example, I will say with medical institutions, with hospitals and clinics, publicly available data is only giving us certain type of facilities, while I know when we go into community, there are so many of these kind of smaller clinics and doctors' offices, and we didn't really get to the bottom of like, is there a publicly available data to show that? But I will say that it really depends on amount of effort and time that we can dedicate to each and every, because we are trying to cover a host of domains, but I would like to continue this conversation and get more insight.
He says he's happy to connect.
Perfect. That sounds great. And I'll see where I am right now. And this is just a snippet from the website. And I will exit the PowerPoint and go to the okay. Do you all see my screen with keeping track online and 4 tabs, explore data, reg communities by risk?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So if there are no any other questions or anything that is coming up in a chat box, I will dive into this. So basically, I will start with explore data, even though we'll spend the least amount of time on this today. I mentioned before that on explore data, we have a host of indicators. As you can see, they're grouped by different domains: economic conditions, housing, and homelessness. You can search by keywords. You can filter by location, by different demographic groups. And I will just go to one indicator to show you how it looks like and tools available. So this is a child poverty indicator. Legend is here from the lightest yellow to the blue, with the darker shades showing higher numbers. So we see that communities in the Bronx, Lower East Side, and some communities in Brooklyn are having higher poverty rates, child poverty rates. You can also explore the data by different breakdowns. So in addition to looking at the child poverty for the total population, we can explore it by race and ethnicity and see the child poverty for Asian children, Black children, white children. Below the map, there is a section where you have all the data in like a small table view. You can also toggle through different years. For most of the indicators, the data goes back to 2009, in some cases even before that. So we are updating data annually as soon as the data is available. And I'll just click once more, household type. So this is child poverty, depending on the type of household your child lives in, like single married couple, single mother, single father, etc. In this corner, we just developed this tool, which is District Overlay Tool, which allows users to really see the data on a community district level, but also compare with the council districts that they are in. And in addition to the map tool, the same data can be viewed in a table format and sorted by different sub-indicators, breakdowns, and with all capabilities to the right. And there is also a bar chart view where users can, I'll say, check all. And this is comparing child poverty in different household types. And we see that the children who are living with single mothers are experiencing the highest poverty. So I will pause here in terms of explore data, and we can come back to this later. And I will move on to the rank communities by risk. In the same way as on explore data, data is grouped by 6 domains. Overall risk is there, created of all 18 indicators. Map is shaded with the darker blue being highest and the lighter lowest risk. You also have a district overlay functionality. And on the right side here, you can add other communities. So by default, you have Mott Haven, like the highest and the lowest risk highlighted, but I can highlight any other community. And what is happening below the map, these communities are getting added to this table, where we can now compare overall index and then index within each of the domains for these communities. And then at the bottom, you can also download our publication. And you can also compare community by typing in here or just clicking on the map. And then community gets added. And really where it gets like more insightful is if we move on to the domain. I'm on economic security domain, and we are viewing the data. It's in a risk ranking, even though we have the data available for 2018, you all might know that data doesn't get published at the same time. So we are using, for the publication we published at the end of 2019, we are using 2017 data across all indicators. And on economic, go ahead.
I have a question. So since you've created the district overlay functionality tool, have you seen greater action by elected leaders and ownership of the data by elected offices?
Well, we launched the tool in March, so it's only been a couple of months since tool is there. Normally, we have I didn't really mention it in the beginning, but we have a huge advocacy council like a group, and we are the one who are making many meetings with elected officials. So I cannot speak to that activity in terms of is tool more used for the purpose that it is intended to, but within the community that we're in touch with, it was really well received. And the reason we actually developed the tool is that we always had to create like printed publication that would overlay these different district overlay tools. So it is something definitely that we will be monitoring, both through Google Analytics, where we monitor activities on the site, but also through information we get from our partners. But we spent a couple of past months, in addition to doing many other things that were not closely tied to this. We spent a couple of past months promoting the tool, and I think there will be a Pecha Kucha presentation with a district overlay tool on Friday. Is there any other question? Okay, if not, I will move on. So when you click on the domain, you see the year of data, which can be changed, as I said, and you also see below the map every indicator and data for these particular districts. And if you click down on KT Online indicator, then you will be taken to the Explore tab for this particular indicator, where you can explore other breakdowns. And I will move on to the map community resources tool. And the layout is similar as on rank communities by risk. So on the main map, you see overall, and the map is showing overall ranking. If you click on any of the domains like economic security, you are able to see the map with overall index, but you can also toggle and just have a map with the median incomes for families with children. So this tool really allows you to see more of the data behind the index and couple that with the assets that are here on the right-hand side. So by default, banks are selected. I can unselect them. It takes a couple of seconds. And I can select, for example, emergency food assistance. And I can say that I would like to see only big sites and SNAP sites. And if you zoom into the map, you see that these clusters, these bundles are separating into their own like assets. And then when you hover over each, you can see different information for different assets. But usually it will be the name of the program. And if there is any additional information, it will be here in this hover window. And then if we add community, if we click on a community on the map, underneath we will have this scorecard pre-populated. So I can add Park Slope and maybe Lower East Side. And sometimes it takes a couple of seconds. I can also bring in, probably there's a value of kind of going briefly through the right rails. So as you see in family and community, we have ACS preventive services, immigrant support services, and different cultural institutions. I will click on public libraries. Youth, as I mentioned, these are after-school programs, and these are different Compass programs, and then Beacon and Cornerstone after-school programs. In education, we have several indicators, sub-assets on childcare sites. Then there are pre-K sites, public schools, continuing education. Many of these have a lot of assets, so maybe I can just click pre-K in community-based organizations. Under health, we also have a lot. I already highlighted emergency food assistance, but there is also farmers market, traditional food, retail, mental health services, medical facilities, etc. And then you see some of the assets under housing, free legal services, home base, and different economic security assets. So there is a lot. And if you wonder what is the date of each of the assets, we don't have that capability on this screen yet. But if you go to About Keeping Track, you will see that there is, for each asset, there is a date and the source and when the data was updated. So that can give you that answer. And then across, one second. And then across all of our tools, you'll see the option to download the image, raw data, send data via email, Facebook, or tweet. So that is available as well. And the last one that I will not go into details is create location profiles, where users can actually select one community, I'll just say one of the community districts. They can select some of the indicators and create a profile. So I will not spend more time on that. So I'm envisioning that I believe that I covered everything regarding the tool. Jennifer, is there any question while I'm on a live site?
Not right now, no.
No, okay. Okay, I will then go back to the presentation. So I really had a bit of a hard time envisioning activity that would kind of use this tool, and like it is always helpful for us to see how people are using the tool. And in most of the cases, we are demoing the tool. When we are demoing the tool within organizations that are in the city, it's a slightly different conversation because people are familiar with the geography, familiar with programming. But I'm actually excited to dive into this second part and hear your thoughts and open it up for questions as we move along. So maybe before we kind of split, I would not say into groups, but before we dive into exploring the tool and opening up for questions, I wanted to pose a question like, what is the asset for you personally or work related? And when we do this activity, we sometimes do this community mind mapping with some of our partners, where we really make people, yes, we do have a tool, data is available, but really, how are we thinking about the community is driving the whole narrative. So I will read aloud a couple of these bullets, and I will also tell you a bit about how we are starting these conversations in our community-based assessments in focus groups with our parents and caregivers and youth. So when you think of the community, you might think of things like your family, the places you go in your community, and things that are special to you. What are they? What is your street corner like? Your neighbors? Are there schools, community centers, religious organizations that are especially well known in a community? Is there a place where everyone hangs out? Are there big grocery stores or shopping centers? Is there a lot of crime? What kind of crime? Are streets clean? So these are some of the questions that really I used to set myself when I'm thinking about this data beyond the data, like really thinking what they mean for myself. And some of the questions we ask in our focus groups is really, we are using theatrical analysis when we are talking to parents and caregivers and youth. And we ask them to tell us a story about a family in the neighborhood that is doing well, and that explains why they're doing well. What are the assets and supports that they are having that they are doing well? And also, we ask participants to tell us a story about family in the neighborhood who is not doing well, which is explaining why they're not. So I hope this transition was helpful for further time that we have. And if you want, you can take 5 minutes and maybe like pick a domain of interest on the risk ranking or asset mapping tool. You can identify one or more assets and compare them across different community districts. And you can analyze on your own like mismatch of resources versus needs. And really I outlined some of the questions, but I'm open to any questions that you find relevant. Like, we provide location. Is there more context needed on this tool? How you can apply this tool in your own work, I would like to hear. What are we missing from the asset list? I know that we spoke a bit about the churches, but I'm sure there is more. And did you find example of community needs where there was or was not enough assets available? So I can, with this, if you want, we can take a couple of minutes and come back with questions. And after this, if there is interest, I can walk you through the process of how we are supporting our partners and people that are in touch with us with this activity of using the raw data that is available on our tool, but also oftentimes people have a need to create their own maps, which look different than what we provide on the tools. So I have a couple of slides that we can do towards the end on that. So I can exit the screen and I'll come back to the presentation view. So I can, give me 1 second. So I'll stop sharing for now so I can see the Q&A and chat options.
Maria, can you provide the link to the tool in the chat?
Sure.
Make sure everyone has it.
Sure, absolutely. That's a good idea. Okay. And I see one of the question, is the tool open source? And yes, tool is for free, available for everyone to use. All data are available for download in a CSV format, and we are rethinking what other sharing options can be helpful to our users. But answer is yes. Maybe we can use these 5 minutes to stretch and take a break. I know it's a long workshop.
Joe wants to know if like the raw code for the tool is open source, so the actual platform itself. So could it be copied and used?
No, it is not. At the time that we created the tool, the database that is behind the tool is created by Velier. It's a marketing agency that owns the database. I mean, that created the database for us, and they're actually managing the entire site. So we are really giving feedback, and we are initiating new projects, but all the development is happening with their help. We are, I didn't really mention this in the beginning, but we are 18 people organization. So there are 4 of us on research and data teams. So certain things like this, and for a long time, there was only one research and data person on the team. So we are expanding, but that agency is still managing the site. As I said, we are exploring, and we are, because in addition to maintaining the tool, we also produce an array of different analyses beyond keeping track the data book and child well-being index. And we do have interest in creating some kind of publicly available database that other people can use. Or maybe even it might be in the form of API code for the keeping track online, but it's not available at the moment. So I see a question from Jessica Jones. How is housing risk determined? So if you, I will not share the screen, but you can all just access it on your own. I assume that you logged in. So under housing indicator, we are using three data points for creating that sub-index on housing risk, and that is a rate of families and children in homeless shelters, overcrowded rental housing, like number of households where there is more than one person that occupies a room, and severe rent burden. Severe rent burden means that household is spending more than 50% of their rent on of their income on rent. So we are using these 3 indicators to create a housing risk index. But our work in the housing domain goes way beyond these 3 indicators. We are really monitoring a host of indicators in a housing purview. We are part of and leading New York City Housing and Homelessness Coalition, and affecting different bills, budgets, and changes on a advocacy and policy level. I see a question about the methodology for the index for Joe Baldwin, and I will just give you a brief. So basically, we are using and you have all the information in the publication itself, but we are using a linear scaling technique that, for those of you who don't know, it's really it's calculating the difference between a value of one community with the value of the lowest value community, and that is divided by the number of, like, by the difference between the highest value community district and the lowest one. We are exploring different techniques such as a Z-score. Like, we are thinking, like, this was a technique used before any of us joined the team. And we are constantly trying to improve the index, or really think, like, is different technique producing different results. But then all the standardized values are scaled from low to high, with higher values signifying increasing risk and lower values decreasing. And then they are averaged within the domain, and then each community really falls with one of these risk categories. And all that you can find in any of our publications. I see a question: did we work with Brandeis on the index, Child Opportunity Index? I'm aware of the Brandeis, and I believe that their platform is also managed by the same company that manages our database. I am not sure if at the time we worked on their index, but I know for sure that we consulted a vast array of indexes, like including Kids Count and Brandeis. Like, I'm sure that we consulted all of those. So maybe we can give us a few more minutes before we come back. And if you have any questions about the tool, I can also share my screen and answer the question as you are exploring. And also, if you feel like that I should move along sooner, tell me, and I can do that too. We don't have to spend a whole 1 hour and a half. So if you want, we can spend some time answering, or you can ask me some of these questions. Otherwise, I can walk you through a couple of last slides and through that process of creating your own map by using my Google tools. I believe, Jennifer, I created a poll asking if you're familiar with the tool, just to gauge if it is something of interest for participants. But maybe we can answer these, stay on this slide first, and I will take any questions. Jennifer, does this mean I should move along? Because I don't see my chat and group and Q&A anymore.
Oh, Jessica wants to know if you had mentioned earlier, but if you're seeing census tracts on the map or neighborhood areas.
That is a good question, and the answer for our online tool is no. We are some of the indicators as you know, American Community Survey, some of the indicators are coming from the PUMA level, which is the closest to our community districts. We do not provide data on a census tract level. However, when we are compiling the data for our community-based assessments, which are focusing on one particular community or set of communities, we do show data for certain indicators on a census tract level. And in most of the cases, we are aggregating census tracts to neighborhood tabulation areas, which are the most, they're bigger than a census tract, but smaller than community district. And they're kind of the closest to what people think when they think about their neighborhoods. So, but on our tool, we do not represent the data on the census tract. We did recently in March launched new geography, which is zip code, because we heard, especially for some services and for certain data points, it's really the most helpful geography as people are planning their programming by using zip code level data. So you can find a couple of indicators by zip code. Majority are by community district, and some indicators are by school district, mainly education indicators, and then there is also UHF district, which pertain to some of the health indicators, and then all the data are aggregated by the borough and city level. And since you mentioned the census tract, I have to mention our Department of City Planning, which has a census fact finder tool where data are available by the census tracts and also aggregated to the neighborhood tabulation area. Is there any other question? Okay, then I will move to the last part, and we can always come back to anything that is of your interest. I'll move to the last part, which I call create your own map. And I will walk you through a couple of slides, and then I can do it live. But basically, as I said, we are in close touch through different coalitions that we are part of or that we are leading. We are in touch with many service providers in a city. And when when this past summer, there was a RFP for Administration for Children's Services Preventive Services, where all of the providers needed to submit their community asset map. And usually organizations don't have capacity to map them. They don't really know where to start. So that last summer, it is just one example where we were overwhelmed with questions about our asset mapping tool. And then we had situations where people would like to create their own asset maps using only specific assets. And this is like a very simple tool that I use from my Google Maps. I used it way before I was familiar with the other GIS tools, Azure being one of them. But basically, if you click on a raw data, you can download the file on our site. And every asset has a latitude and longitude. So it has a geographic coordinate. And then, so I have it here. I created like a CCC account, Gmail account, if you want to log in on my Google Maps. And I'll go back to the live site in a second, but I just want to show it to you here. And in a handout, there is a Word document with the same username and password. But basically, it's cccnewyorkmapping@gmail.com. And password is CCC capital mapping, small caps. And you can have these slides for your reference. But basically, when you log in there, you will be in a window that looks like this. And then we can go along together and create a new map, import layer, assign location columns. I will walk you through that in a second. And there are different sharing, viewing, exporting options. As I said, it is very basic tool, but it can be helpful, especially if organizations don't have more advanced GIS capacity or knowledge of different either proprietary or open source tools. So I will leave these slides here. I will not come back to them. And also on the last slide, you have my email and the website for our database, which is data.cccnewyork.org, and the website for our main organization site. So I'm exiting the presentation. And I'm here now on my maps. When you click Get Started, you'll be prompted to put in your login information. But I'm already like in a window I created, and there are a couple of maps. So when you're here, you can just click on Create a new map. And I'll just backtrack for a second. So when you're on an asset mapping tool, you can choose a particular asset. In this case, these are banks. And if you go on a raw data, you'll have a zip folder with 2 files. I'm just going to give it a second. So there are 2 files. One is with assets and one is with the risk ranking data for every community district. So of our interest here is the asset file, and I will open it so we can all take a look. And in this case, we have a location, which is a community district. There is latitude and longitude, and there is a category bank. In terms of some other assets, like if you go on a food retail, then we'll have a farmer's market and a traditional food retail. So category can have more than one site. And then in the description, there is a name of the bank. And again, this table will look slightly different for every asset. So I'll close this out and I'll go back to the My Google Maps tool. So I'm here, I'm on Untitled Map, and I will click Import. And we can select the file from our device. And here I have asset banks, which I downloaded. And it automatically recognizes the columns with the latitude and longitude. And then it is asking me here, choose a column to title your markers. And I can choose a description, which has a name of the bank, and do finish. So here are all the banks populated for the New York City. And if we zoom in further, I believe when we click on a pin, we can see categories bank. This is the name of the bank, Citibank National Association. And I will showcase you with a different asset, but before I move, I can actually show you here. So on this map, I loaded, in addition to banks, I loaded food, retail, and food and nutrition assistance. So you have this option to style by category, which then pulls from the data that is in a data table. And you can also view the data table here, and you see category has traditional food, retail, but it also has a farmer's market. So it also has a farmer's market. So you can use that to symbolize your assets in a different way. And then what I'm just trying to go through. Basically, you can copy existing map, you can create new map, you can print this map. So you can decide, is it landscape, image, and do a print of the map. And it will take the zoom level that you set up on the actual map. So you can cancel, and it looks like this. And there are different sharing. There is also a preview of the map, which can show you how the map will look like when you share it with someone. So here it is. And then there's still option to click on and off different assets that you already loaded in the map. And I'm thinking if there are different sharing capabilities, but technically you can share the link for the map with anyone or add people and groups to view the map. And I'm trying to think if there was anything else that I wanted to share, but maybe while I'm on this screen, I can take any questions and walk you through any other capability of the My Google Map. And I can also stop sharing for a moment so I can view the chat. Okay. I see one comment. It's not about Google Maps. It's about zip overlay, and that these boundaries are in flux. And I agree. I agree with you. And that was one of the caveats we went with. And but we also do have option to update our boundary from time to time. So I think we are open for that solution as well. And I see a comment from Jessica Jones. Thank you, Jessica. She's saying it is a great tool. I love the idea of organizations being able to access the data so easily and make their own maps. Thank you. And I will say also, even if people are not using my Google Maps or any other tool, there is a lot that can be done within our tool by taking a screenshot, zooming the map for geography that you need, highlighting one, etc. So, but I do see, I mean, we do believe in the value of sharing the data as much as possible so people can use it in a way that suits them the best. So I will say that we are at 1 hour mark. We do have more time if we need. I see. Okay, there is one more question. Marine Luyan, are the assets you compiled your own data you gathered? The assets we compiled on our database and that we are using for other analysis are all coming from publicly available data sources from different New York City agencies. So I think I shared that slide showing where each asset is coming from. But like, for example, I'll say there is a New York City Department of Education has a school file. So that has a data with all of the schools. And it's pretty much ready to be uploaded. So we only do like a basic data formatting and we upload it. In other cases, for example, childcare data, subsidized childcare data is not typically publicly available. And it was until 2019 under Administration for Children's Services. So we have a relationship with that agency and we receive the data with addresses. And then what we do is geocode the data so we can present it spatially. So that is piece of the work that we are doing to get the data up on our site. And all our partnering agencies are aware of the tool and we are keeping them posted about any changes that we are making. I'll give a third example that some of the housing support services are available just on agencies' portals. In that case, we are getting the data from the portal and I will say accessed on November 4th, 2019, because agency might be updating the data in the meantime. And we are doing our best to keep all of the assets as much as updated as possible. But my personal goal is to be able to revise all of them once a year. Story is slightly different when we are publishing. Yeah, I made a wrong touch. Yeah, all the joys of virtual conferencing. So if you're all hearing me, yes, so I was kind of giving you different examples of how we get the data. But we do not collect data like by any means on the ground. We are really using what agencies are providing to us already. Okay. Is there, I'm not sure how, if you heard my entire answer, but okay. So I will do this. So I'm sharing the screen with my contact information, and you have also a PDF of the presentation in handouts. And I know that recording is going to be available very shortly after the presentation is over. So feel free to be in touch with us. Email me with any questions or comments. We are always open to hearing from other people, and especially people who are doing similar type of work as we do. And Jennifer, if you think it's right, if you agree, I think we can close the session. Unless there is any other question that came up in a poll on Q&A.
Wonderful. Does anyone else have any other questions before we end the session? Maren has a question. If you can see it. Okay.
I can actually stop sharing. See.
Oh, Maren just wanted to mention that the Google account has a two-step verification. So she tried to sign in to Gmail account, but it has a two-step verification.
I see. With the information that I provided. Am I right? I will check my email. I'll check that email. I will just definitely encourage everyone. The best way to use it is just by using your own Google account, Gmail, or create one just for these purposes. Yeah, I didn't know about this two-step verification, but I think you will have the same capabilities if you just log in with your own Gmail account.
There may also be a way to turn the two-step verification off.
Yeah, I can try doing that too. And then if I do that, and if you're trying to access that account, you will also see one map with New York City community districts over there, so which I provided so people can overlay their assets over the boundaries of communities. But I will take a look at this two-step, and I will try to turn it off. So if you're trying to access it at a different time, you're able to do it. Oh, and thanks everyone for comments. Yeah, thank you all for joining us. I'm really happy. This is my this is actually for our organization the third year that we are that we joined the CIC conference. And later this week, I believe on Wednesday, my colleague Bijan Kimiagar will be talking more about our community-based assessment and analysis and the methods we are using in our focus groups and interviews with communities. So that should be interesting. It's I believe youth and community engagement session on Wednesday. Thank you, Jennifer, for facilitating with me.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for taking your time today to participate in our pre-conference workshops. Tomorrow we will have our keynote presentation starting at noon Eastern time, so 12 p.m. Yes, 12 p.m. Eastern. And Angela Glover Blackwell will be presenting. So it's sure to be a wonderful keynote presentation. So please join us tomorrow and enjoy the rest of your days.
Thank you all. Have a great evening. Bye.